Yeah.
Now, do you have a particular interest, like the arts or like
I mean,
the
you can.
economy, like
For me,
technology?
Close this here for you.
the arts, the economy, and I'm just curious to hear about hear you talk more about public safety and crime. I'm just kind of curious on
It
that.
is the everybody's topic, public safety and crime.
I think the city's just added. We're good to go? And we can
Where'd
do.
Roland go? He's gone.
He's
Well, we're
gone.
recording, so.
Oh, we are recording?
Yeah, I just started. So.
Okay. All right,
right,
let's get
there you
started
go.
then. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Politics on the Plate. And today we have Republican candidate David O. Just so you guys know, election is going to be Tuesday, November 7th, so make sure you get out and vote. And a lovely round of applause for David O for coming out today.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes, we're going to just be talking, keeping it pretty chill. We're recording, so let's
All
jump
right.
right into it. So, David, honestly, when did you know you wanted to be in politics? Did you ever try anything else, or you just I'm going to be mayor? That is what it is.
No, I wasn't interested in politics. I was interested in law.
Okay.
And I knew very early on that I wanted to be a lawyer. I had never seen a lawyer, had no experience with lawyers. My father immigrated from Korea during the Korean War.
Okay.
And so he had lived through the Japanese occupation, World War II, and the Korean War. And so he came to Philadelphia in '53 and started the first Korean American church.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, so I was born and raised in Philadelphia, and it was a different time period. And I still live on the same block of 58th and Thomas Avenue in Kingsessing,
Okay.
Cobbs Creek, Kingsessing border.
Uh-huh.
And it was a challenging place in terms of crime, in terms of poverty, things like that. And what I saw was that there were all these problems that my friends and people around me faced. But on television, there was this guy named Perry Mason, and he was this good, smart person who had just the ability to bring justice.
Well, David, I'm a millennial, so who's Perry Mason?
Yeah, well, I
don't-
didn't. Listen, you should not know who he is.
Okay.
We're talking about. So this is an old television program, and it was about this lawyer, but it wasn't like the more modern shows where they got like the nice convertible car and all that. He was like just this hardworking guy, and he would believe in a case, and by the end of the show, he would save the day.
Okay.
And then at the end, dun dun dun, he'd be at his little desk with a little light on, Perry Mason working away, right? And so I said, wow, I'd like to be like that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I didn't think I could be that guy, so I just kind of like kept that to myself. But one day, my father, who would have us all sit around the dining room table, ask each of us, what do you want to be? My sister wanted to be a doctor. My brother wanted to be an electrical engineer, get his PhD. And here I am, getting bad grades in school and everything, getting suspended and all these problems. So I couldn't answer that question. But one day I said I'd like to be a lawyer. And my father's reaction was like really impactful to me. He was smiling and thinking about something, and I said, "Wow!" I gave him a good answer.
Like, you like this?
So
Okay.
it stayed with me. And to make a very long story short, I did apply to law school, and fortunately, I got in.
Okay.
And I really tried to apply myself, and I will say that I have many times been in the land of regret, where you really intend to do well and you just don't.
Yeah.
And you have nobody to blame but yourself. So I've been through that cycle several times. But once I got out of law school, I started in the Philadelphia District Attorney's office, and I really applied myself. And because I lacked confidence in my abilities, in my smarts, I did know that I could work hard. And so I really set myself to working hard. And then, lo and behold, I was a talented trial lawyer. So, right, I had some talent.
Okay.
So talent is different than like work ethic. Some people are talented. They're just talented. Other people, they work real hard, but they might not have the talent.
Okay.
Some people have the talent. They don't have the work ethic. So
Yeah.
I had the work ethic by this time, and I found that I had talent in the field that I had wanted to go into. And as I said, since I was never confident, I always tried to outwork everybody.
Okay.
Long hours, weekends, holidays, that whole thing.
But eventually you became confident.
Well,
Are you still in that journey right now? Even as you're in the race to be mayor, you're still figuring that out.
yeah, I wouldn't say that I'm ever confident. I would say that I'm committed
Okay.
to the thing I want to do, and particularly if I believe it is a good thing, and I'm not deterred. Like I'm not swayed away. And I'm persistent, and but I do have to believe in what I'm doing, and I try to be open minded because I know that I'm missing a lot. I'd like to get a lot of things in there, but you know, I cannot be unsure of what I'm doing. I have to be sure of what I'm doing and open minded.
Okay.
So, I think it is really the idea that you're trying to provide a service at your service.
Okay.
So I think that's what public service is about. It's being at your service.
Okay.
Yeah. So I ended up,
Sure.
leaving the practice of law because I eventually found that what I had really started doing was serving myself. Like I was really building my practice, trying to build my name, trying to, be successful in the business of law. And I was away from what I originally started out to do. That was to help people.
Okay.
And so one day I was listening to the radio. This is way before your time. And they were talking about riverboat gambling. This is before gaming was here. The whole idea was we could put a ferry on the river and people would get on board and they'd gamble on the river. And
I watched Ozark.
yeah,
I watched
and
Ozark.
so, what the radio was saying was this is going to solve Philadelphia's job problems and it's going to create all this economic growth and all that. And I said to myself, that's not true. Somebody should really talk about jobs and about education and vocational career training. And I just eventually said, well, why don't I do that? Like, why don't I just use the platform of running for city council at large to talk about these issues? And, good chance I won't win, but if I do a really good job, maybe I could interject these issues into, the
zeitgeist,
race with
yeah.
the more serious candidates backed by the parties, got all the money and all that thing. So I ended up running, and I talked about intermodal, transportation, about creative arts economy, about innovation, and about how people live together in a more stimulating way as the economy changes on a global basis. Like, what is the future of Philadelphia? What is the future of our nation in the global economy? And I found that what I was talking about was really kind of like not well received. And I think
Why was that?
well, I was talking about a 24-hour zone, and what I meant was a place where a writer, a filmmaker, a musician could sit down with a scientist and have a cappuccino listening to Latin jazz at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like it wasn't clubbing,
It was like lounging.
it was sharing and collaborating and stimulating each other because you're probably not in the 9 to 5 economy. And the whole idea of being able to go to a space which is conducive to, stimulating ideas. Like, what I would say is this, the artist, the engineer, the architect, the builder. So you start with the artist, right? Someone imagines an archway. It isn't even real. It's an archway. They draw a picture. Someone imagines like a craft that can fly. And eventually someone says, how do you really build that archway? How would you construct it? How would you make a vehicle that could go and fly in space? But you begin with the imagination. And then eventually someone gets an idea and they need to begin collaborating with engineers and other people, and then you end up with a product, right?
Yeah.
So the scientist, the journalist, the writer, the musician, the filmmaker all share that in common. And you need a space for them to engage in and be stimulated because, the mind gets very dull. You need to stimulate with new ideas, new perspectives, and the more global it is, the more you are being engaged with people who solve the problem differently, and sometimes better. or maybe with a lack of resources, or maybe they did it naturally, right? As opposed to like with a lot of artificial products and things like that.
Yeah.
So the idea that we're an international global city, we have so many universities, we have different perspectives, and then that turns out into expression, right? So that's what I was talking about. But what people were interpreting is you're going to have like this part of town that's like pumping out music, 24-hour drinking and boozing and all that stuff. So it took a while, but I kind of stuck with that conversation, and eventually I got elected, and it was in part because of those type of ideas. They were not like really that well received yet because we're a blue collar town.
We are.
And a lot of people, less so today, but previously, if they heard arts and like culture and music and things like that, they would think that's Hollywood. Like, that's not for us. That's not for my children. That's not for me. What I want is a factory job. We got to bring the factories back to Philly, right?
Okay.
And I'm saying, like, the factories are not coming back to Philly at that time. And there's other things. But it's not like certain types of manufacturing wouldn't come back here, right? But at that time, we weren't going to have, like, the factories they were thinking about, like back in the 60s and the late 60s, things like that. So trying to convince people that this creative arts economy, creative innovative economy is a real economy, not a hobby, not a pastime. It is a real economy, and it's really for your children. It's really about you and your family. It's about your future. They will be earning money, doing what they love, being very good at what they do, and there will be other people in the world doing other things. We all have like different things that we do. So, the problem with the knowledge-based economy is that a lot of times people think that has to do with academically, successful people who get masters and PhDs and things like that. The creative arts economy, however, it's much more broad.
It is.
And and because it deals with like human perspective, human emotions, and connectivity, communication, you can take people that have very tragic lives, had very harsh lives, people who had made a lot of mistakes, and they put it into song, they put it into a novel, they put it into a screenplay, they put it into spoken word, they put it into beats and rhythms. So what happens is you have a way for people to do what they do well. Sometimes they paid a very heavy price for the experience and perspectives they have, but now they can be successful at that. They can share that, and for me, I think about, really two things. One is we need the money. People need money. They got to feed their kids. They got to pay for things. They want to live better, and we need jobs. But the other thing is people aspire to be something more. And how do you deliver that? Because if you can't get that in Philadelphia, you might as well go to some other city, right? You might as well go someplace else. Not everybody's going to go. Not everybody can go.
Yeah.
But for those who can get out of Philly, they will, to become who they want to be.
Exactly.
If we don't make that happen here. So we're losing a lot of really talented and capable people, and they are a very important part of our society, and they're a very important part of our economy. And I want to say this because people don't, I think, oftentimes appreciate what I just said about the economy. It's the tourists, it's the workers, it's the entrepreneurs that basically bring in the revenues for us to provide better services in our city, provided you don't have a corrupt government.
Yeah.
Which is an important point I'm going to make. Because if it takes $10 to do something, but $15 are ending up someplace it shouldn't be. Now it takes $25, and you're getting very little on what you're putting in. But who's putting that in? It's a lot of poor people.
Exactly.
A lot of times people talk about the rich don't pay enough. Well, the poor pay more than enough, right? Every time there is something, it is really falling upon the poor and the low income, and it's disproportionate. It's actually illegal and unfair. Like, everybody will be taxed to a degree under the law. It's when you violate the law and you overtax people, and the people you can victimize the most are the poor. So, if we have more money coming in because lawyers who live in the main line come into Philadelphia and work, they got to pay a wage tax.
Yeah.
If they don't come into the city, if they work from home, they don't pay that wage tax. If tourists don't come in here and go to concerts and dinner, all of this falls upon the residents in typically what is property tax. And when it's not property tax, it's a soda tax or some other tax or some other penalty or something
Yeah.
else. And that becomes just overbearing on people. And we see what? People are very frustrated. They have tremendous anxiety. They don't know what's going to happen in their future.
The quality of living is just
Quality
going
of
down.
and then we see violence.
Exactly.
We see crime and violence. And, you know, some of the violence is related to insecurities and the publication, like the distribution, you know, of your beef. And how someone has insulted you, and you feel the need to say what you're going to do, and now you're going to have to do. But then the rest of it is, a lot of it is related to the drug dealing, and it's interesting to me that people try to excuse drug dealing. There's nothing to excuse.
Okay.
It's a lot of money. So if you're talking about a corner in Kensington, you know, some of them produce like $250,000 a week.
Jesus.
Well. You're not hanging on that corner for no reason.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people want that corner. You hang on to it with murder. You hang on to it with violence, right? And so recruiting people into that lifestyle. And where does that money go? That money goes into more crime. And so it gets invested. But that money is produced by people who need a $10 bag like 14 times a day.
Jesus.
And they're getting their money from people who are driving into Philly from all over the place looking for what they're going to pay for, right? I'm trying to be polite on the air here, but you know,
Yeah.
they are coming to a central location where anything goes, where the police are instructed not to arrest the drug dealers because drug addicts need drugs, right? The drug addicted need to get their drugs. And to get their drugs, they need to get money, and then it's kind of like a hands-off policy. So we have like an overwhelming number of people who are choosing to come to Philadelphia. They don't need to be here. They're better off where they are. They have many times family and friends and a base, but they can't purchase drugs in front of police. They can't wander around. They can't prostitute. They
So
can't.
this is like the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
over
So
here.
so what they're leaving behind in where they're from is they're leaving behind bed space, detox, behavioral health. They're programs for them, and it's more accessible because when you come to Philadelphia, there's so many people in need that they're not getting served. And you know, I will say also this, that there's different ways that people make money, right? So let's say I repair cars. I repair your car, fantastic. You tell all your friends, they come to me, I do a beautiful job.
Okay.
Someone comes to me and I don't quite repair their car and they got to come back to me. And by doing a bad job, they keep coming back, they keep coming back, they keep coming back. So the fact that I don't actually repair their car is how I make money, right? So there's a way to do things where you really solve the problem and you make money because of the good job you do.
Okay.
Another way is you never quite do a good job. Let's look at, let's say, a pothole in Philadelphia, right? That's a good example,
all the
right?
potholes, yeah.
If I do a good job and I fill it and it lasts for 5 years, let's say I got $100 for the pothole. Well, I got $100 over 5 years for doing a great job on filling that pothole. But on the other hand, if I do a bad job and I got to fill that pothole 5 times,
A year.
5 times, well, in 5 years, I made $500 on the same pothole. But if I have to do, like, if that one pothole becomes 3 potholes, I'm making $300 in over 5 years at $1,500, right? The issue is who lets me do that? And then we get to the issue of corruption and collusion in government.
Okay.
Because maybe it wasn't about filling the pothole. Maybe it was about me helping some politician get elected, and in exchange, what I got back was the pothole. And they don't care how much it costs. And after a while, like 20 years, I'm just getting paid. How about I don't even fix the pothole? How about I just give you a bill for 3 potholes, you know, over $1,500, and I didn't bother with it because nothing's ever going to happen to me. And that, if you take that to education, to health care, to job creation, to affordable housing. Um, that is multiplied in many ways. For
Yeah.
example, misery. Um, there's a profit in misery, and so if you could solve someone's problem, there goes your dollars. If you keep them hanging on, you get a constant flow of money through
Misery.
government. Government money that the taxpayers pay, and so that is kind of like, the challenge that we face in many of these situations.
I want to take it back to the drug dealing. So we all know that drug dealing is bad, but
Yep.
what about the folks who would say to you, well, how does a place like Kensington even exist? Is it due to low efficacy, broken windows theory? All these things are going on that really become an incubator for crime. So not excusing it, but how do you go into a neighborhood like Kensington and say this can no longer happen? Do you throw money at the problem?
Yeah.
Is this more of a DA thing where we got to get Krasner out of there and we need to start arresting folks? Like, how do you really, because Kensington is just really fascinating to me. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
from Philly too, and I've been told that like Kensington has always been that way, but it's really hard for me to
It
believe
hasn't always been that way.
if I'm on the 3 bus
Yeah.
and I'm on the 3 bus just looking at everything that's going on. It just feels like Kingston feels like a neighborhood or an island of its own. Like, how can a place like that exist in Philly? Or why does it exist?
Here's my perspective on it. Kensington Avenue has turned out the way it has because of intentional policies that have failed policies that have created this explosion of drug addiction. Yeah, the people are addicted to drugs, but they're coming in from every place, and they're settling in Kensington for a reason. They're not going to other neighborhoods because it is in Kensington that they can do whatever they want. It is the central point of where people go with their money,
Yeah.
usually for prostitution, things like that. And so when the laws are not being enforced, because that is the beginning of the problem. In other words, if you look at it from this perspective, if you live in Kensington with your 2 daughters, let's say, and you got drug dealers ready to shoot each other on the corner, you got your kids trying to walk to school, and you got dudes riding around in cars looking for young kids, you got a lot of, concerns.
Yeah.
And then there's, prostitution right in front of your children. There's defecation. You got to clean that up.
Yeah.
Where are your rights? In other words, how did you become a person that has no laws available to them, no services available? You're paying your taxes. Look at your library. I mean, nobody can go there. I mean, you won't want to send your kids there.
Yeah.
It's dangerous, right? There's all kinds of stuff going on. And the people are really focused on the drug addicted to the extent they're not focused on the young people who get caught up in selling drugs and getting shot and killing each other. They're not focused on the people who got hurt or murdered to get those drugs here. They're not focused on you, your family, and the fact you can't go shopping, like the stores are closing and all that, right? So it is a very unbalanced place. And how did that happen? Well, if you go back in time, Kensington was a working class neighborhood, and while it had problems, as jobs disappeared, it was not anywhere near what it is today. And there's a point where it's just really so out of control. It's so completely unbalanced. So when you look at what has happened with just the amount of crime, dumping, illegal tractor trailers, everything there.
Yeah.
It is a neighborhood that makes so much money. The amounts of money in that neighborhood due to crime, but it's all based on human trafficking and human misery and things like that. And then there's a whole set of people that come in, good people, to service them, and they're making money to provide services, and yet there's a constant influx of people in need of services, and there's a constant amount of money, but not enough to help the people. It's just like overwhelmed. And what I would say also is this, that if you look at Kensington, the level of poverty has increased year after year after year. There were people who had jobs. There were stores you could go to. There's less stores. There's less jobs. Things like that. People are more and more poor. And there are services for people who are poor. And for every entity that provides services, they're getting reimbursements. But yet, you will find right next to a block full of poor people, like dirt poor,
Yeah.
a building coming up that's like $800,000 per unit.
Yes.
Now, how does that coexist? Because here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're living on this block, how much can you afford for a cup of coffee? How much are they paying for a cup of coffee? The price is going to rise, right? The price is going to rise.
Mm-hmm.
If the city looks at that building and say, you know what, you live right a block down, so what we're going to do is we're going to assess your property instead of being $85,000, because that's what it is,
Mm-hmm.
or $120,000. Because you got this great big building here, they're like $800,000 per unit. We're going to assess your property from, let's say, $120,000 to $425,000, and you can't pay it, right? You can't pay that,
Yeah.
and your house looks exactly the same as before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an improper assessment methodology, and that's what happens. So eventually, all those blocks become available for development. All of those developments are very luxury housing and all that. And now you have this process called gentrification in its most negative sense, where people are being displaced. And where do they go? Because now you can't afford, you won't find another house like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that same house that you were in is eventually going to be $1 million house.
Yeah.
Right? And
It will be.
you and your family never got the benefits of that property.
So can you speak to that? So where are the people going? Because I'm fully aware of just gentrification, being from West Philly myself.
Mhm.
Where are these people going once they sell their homes, or who are these luxury apartments for? What is Philadelphia anticipating is going to happen within the next 5 to 10 years that those luxury apartments can be filled?
So I don't think there's any plan here. I think what happens is, for example, when you have bad policies that ruin neighborhoods, they become ripe for development.
Mm-hmm.
And because the houses are going to go for sheriff's sale, or someone's going to get a house because people know they can't afford to live there. Eventually they're going to sell it for something.
Yeah.
But the thing about business people, they get it as cheap as possible for the most money as possible. So if they could get it for $100,000, they wouldn't get it because they could get it for $80,000.
Okay.
If they could get your house for $80,000, they won't buy it because they could get it for $60,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if they could get it for $60,000, they might as well try and get it for $40,000.
Goodness.
Yeah, and if they could make $1 million, why not $1.5 million? If they could make $1.5 million, why not 2? If they could make 2, why not 3?
Yeah.
So you have these forces, and so they're in it for the money. But if you are government, you are representative of the public interest, and that is different. So yes, we need development, and we need luxury housing, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But we cannot displace all these people. We have to improve their lives. We have to give them stability. We have to provide good education for their children, and the hope that they will have a better life. And the quality of life is not, really determined by simply money.
Mm-hmm.
You can live well. You can have a wonderful life with your family and friends in your neighborhood, your community. That really is a reflection of who you are and who your values are. But if you cannot afford to live there, if you don't see a future for yourself there, I'm from West Philly, Southwest Philly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Southwest Philly as well. And we can see what's happening, right? In other words, our property taxes doubled for no reason. And I'll say what no reason is.
Yeah.
It's the same house. It's a year older. There's as much murder and crime. 56 in Chester had 6 people shot, right? 1 killed. Down the block, a couple was murdered. Around the corner, another guy was killed, and and people in the neighborhood are subject to violent crime.
Yeah.
There is no good school. There's no public amenity, and yet our property taxes have doubled. Now, at the time, I was in council.
Mm-hmm.
Before I quit my job, right, became unemployed.
Yeah.
But I could have afforded the increase in the taxes, but my neighbors can't.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, right? I might be able to afford a doubling of my taxes because it's really not that big in the scheme of things. But if you're barely making it, or you're on a fixed income, or you don't have income and your property tax doubled, now you can't make it, right? And that's a lot of pressure on people. Well, that doesn't end it's going to keep going, right? It's going to keep going because people can see what is happening in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And property values are going up, but they're actually not worth the amount of money they're going up to.
Mm-hmm.
But there is someone who is willing to pay more. But here's the thing, simply because I'm going to pay more doesn't mean it's worth it. Like if you have that glass of water, let's say it's worth $1.20. I could be willing to pay $100 for it. It doesn't mean it's worth $100.
Exactly.
You can't be taxed $100 on that glass.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that people with a lot of money who pay more are willing to come in and pay more for the house that you live in does not necessarily make it worth more. So what happens is we usually look at like sales, sales history or market value, things like that. But Office of Property Assessment says it's none of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't exactly figure out. I have been fighting with OPA, Office of Property Assessment, for years now to say, look, I can't understand what your assessment methodology is. And when we audited it, it came back below industry standard.
Mm-hmm.
Your assessments are all over the board. They seem very contrived.
Okay.
Like they seem like you just make them up. So, but the way I fight on city council is by introducing a bill.
Mm-hmm.
But if my bill is defeated, that's the end of me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference between being a legislator and being an executive. An executive can say, Office of Property Assessment, you're doing it wrong. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to stop this process. I want to see actual assessments. I want those assessments to match. I don't want you using like a 10-year tax abatement because those people are not paying their taxes, and now you're increasing other people's, like assessments and the amount of money, and then, you're going to have a transfer of property, and there's going to be more development. But the problem is this. You're developing things in very artificial ways that are not really part of like an urban plan.
Yeah.
You're just developing where you can make money. And where you can make money is where you're pushing people out. And that's where people want to come into, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so those are parts of the problem, I think, that is really the problem of Philadelphia. Like, how do you resolve this? Well, one, you have to really insist that the law be followed.
Okay.
Like, and I say this, I think one of the biggest lawbreakers in this city is the city government. Breaking laws
Yeah.
all the time,
Right.
in one way or the other. You look at
Yes.
your school, it's probably illegal, right?
Mm.
If you have tremendous disparity in your local neighborhood school,
Yeah.
you can look at another school and see how different it is. That's illegal, right?
Yeah.
If you are trying to get a contract with the city and you have to jump through all this hoops about proving who you are,
Mm-hmm.
that you are a woman and that you are African American. Why is that?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it take years to prove who you are when we can all see who you are, right?
Yeah.
It is a problem, right? And then if you have a contract and you never get to perform your contract and you never get to get paid on your contract and the person you partnered with gets paid, that would be a fraud and that would be illegal, and yet that happens constantly.
Mm-hmm.
I've fought with the Department of Human Services for the bad things they do. They do good things, right?
Yeah.
Like our police department, they do good things. I support them. But then sometimes bad things happen. They all have to be dealt with. So when children are removed from families without a proper lawful reason, they're oftentimes subject to physical and sexual abuse. That is wrong, right? That has to be fought. So that is the government violating the law. They could not take people's children except for violating the law. And there are many instances of that where we actually have to get to holding the government accountable.
Yeah. I want to keep on going. I'm kind of just curious.
Sure.
We're both Philly natives. Do you have a favorite mayor?
I do actually. So let me couch that in.
Or anyone that inspired
there is a mayor, historically speaking. I don't even remember the gentleman's name, to be honest with you. And it's funny because people ask me sometimes. So I have a mayor that I know, and I have a mayor that I don't know, but I read about. And there was this mayor in Philadelphia. It must have been kind of like right after the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And this mayor. a resident of Philadelphia was kidnapped and taken down south as a slave, and this mayor went down there and got him and
Oh,
brought him.
okay.
Like this was like a two-fisted mayor. Like this mayor got what? Like listen, went down there, a whole thing, and brought him back.
Oh.
And I said, wow, that is some incredible story. Like this guy seemed like just like this amazing person, right?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of mayors that I know Ed Rendell, and I don't really know the mayors before Ed Rendell, and I like the different mayors, but I was hired by Ed Rendell into the district attorney's office, and then I served under Ron Castile, and so when Ed Rendell became mayor, he appointed me to the community college board, he appointed me to the mayor's commission on literacy. He appointed me to the Police Advisory Commission.
Okay.
And I always liked Mayor Rendell because he transformed Philadelphia. Like he had like a vision of how things would be better.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started working in the Philadelphia DA's office in 1985, Philadelphia was a town where at 6 o'clock, the whole place was shut down. Had the metal grates, the graffiti, the
goodness.
trash,
Uh-huh.
the pimps, like the whole thing, right? You wouldn't hang out in Center City. You might get mugged. And we had for real prostitutes hanging around
For
like
real
Center City.
prostitutes,
Like,
yeah.
And he did like make it a night. Wednesday nights, the parking authority would not ticket you and you could stay longer. And they started getting, like, people started looking forward to Wednesday night where they hang out, they go places, they stayed a little more open. And eventually, started to rebuild the population.
Okay.
He thought of, like, Avenue of the Arts to bring all these art things onto South Broad Street. And he was aware that tourism was a very important thing for Philadelphia's economy and how you do that. And also, he had different ways. Listen, he had some spectacular failures. I'm sorry, Mayor Rendell, maybe one in particular. But he had tremendous success. And overall, he transformed Philadelphia into really the upward trajectory, that eventually had through many years.
Okay.
So, yeah, I thought he was a smart, innovative person. And listen, I was a young person. He was talking about the arts and culture. And like many people, I was like, poo, what is that? And then I heard this commercial where he said arts and culture bring in more money than all our professional sports teams combined. And the light bulb turned on. I said, this man is talking about something. Because up until then, I always thought arts and cultures were for the rich. It was hoity-toity.
Okay.
So now I'm saying, hey, listen, he just said something. And it opened my eyes, right? Like whatever I was thinking based on whatever stereotype was incorrect. And I began to think more about like the economic impact of arts and culture. And you eventually start to look at, street culture, street art, and what it means. And then historically looking to when 52nd Street out in West Philly was a live music and live performance area, comedy clubs, jazz clubs, live entertainment, and what it meant to our city, and things like, the sound of Philly, and how much money was made, and how people here in Philadelphia, had jobs and really impacted music. And you even have like David Bowie flying in to, to record here at Sigma Sound Studio, some really famous places.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of that is, I think, very eye-opening. And so yeah, I would say that I have that good relationship with Mayor Rendell, except for one issue that's been a big issue between us.
Okay. Well, Philly is live with culture, music, and the arts, but now that we're back into the school season, I think a lot of Philadelphians, what's on their mind is keeping kids engaged in healthy ways that they don't have to be on the streets.
Yes.
I think obviously crime has gone up, but I think a lot of people's concern is like, what are the kids doing? What are the teenagers doing? How are they staying occupied and motivated to not be out on the streets causing ruckus? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing now is very predictable.
Okay.
And a lot of it, I think, has to do with what you tell children, how you give them perspectives, right?
Mhm.
Like the children are the children. They are influenced. Um, Children who don't see a future, children who feel hated, children who feel neglected, children who feel despised, children who look at their environment and surroundings and they just think like there's nothing here for me. They act out, and that becomes a problem. But what are they acting out over? What are they supposed to have? Let's put it that way. They are supposed to have a good school. They're supposed to have curriculum. They're supposed to have things in their school that makes them want to go to school. They're supposed to have character building things. They don't know who they are. They don't know what they're going to be. This is a time for them to experiment. They find out they're good in math or they're good in music, they're good in sports. You know, they have to have a level of equal access at that point in time. You can't have the disparity that we have in our current school system, and I would say it's not okay. It just has existed for such a long time that people have been told time and time again, well, this is just the way it is. And I would disagree with that 1,000%. First of all, the school is not transparent. Nobody knows how much money they get. They don't know how much anything costs. They don't know how much of a dollar ends up in their classroom. There are legal requirements that are blown off constantly in our public schools, and there's no recording. You know, for example, when I say recording, like here's a school and the kids go there and everything's broken and shut down. Here's a school, it's a nicer school, and every parent has to bring like 2 shopping bags of cleaning supplies. And every time they have a class trip, they got to give $20 or whatever. But my point is that's not recorded anywhere. So when I asked the superintendent, what about, you know, the fact that teachers are paying out of their pocket to purchase required school items, the answer that I get is nobody's doing that. Every school has exactly what they need. Well, that's untrue.
Yeah.
I know it is, because nobody just starts buying required school items with their birthday money.
Just for fun.
For
Yeah.
fun. They're doing it because they don't want to see these kids with nothing to do, right?
Yeah.
And we don't have a way to track that. We need to track it so we know really what schools do not provide the materials, because we have a good idea which schools they are, but we don't have any history. We don't have any evidence.
Like any metrics.
And so if teachers are paying like $2,500 out of their pocket, they won't be hanging out in Philly for too long, along with the fact that they're not safe, that they don't have support. You know, I'm sorry to say, you know, a lot of teachers are leaving because they're afraid of violence. So are our social workers. Like, people are really impacted by the fact that they are unsafe.
Exactly.
They want to teach, but before you get to teaching, you don't want to end up in a hospital or shot or beaten or something like that. And it really weighs on their mind. But teachers want to teach, and they want to have a really a meaningful experience with children. If they're doing everything but teaching, they're yet to get to teaching. It's very difficult, it's very challenging, and it's very stressful. So in my mind, transparency of the school is number one. Second of all, you know, once you have transparency, you can have accountability. That means, why is this school this way? How come you put money there? How come money didn't make it here? What happened to this? You have accountability, you have responsiveness. Okay, we're going to do this. So the other thing is really this. The schools that are underperforming have been underperforming. The schools that are under-resourced have been under-resourced. You can tell by neighborhood.
Yeah.
And it has not changed much. In fact, in many ways, it's gotten worse. So what I did when I was in council is I tried to do a school reform bill, like a charter change, and it got nowhere, went nowhere. It was really based on best practices.
Okay.
And I found that, like, this is not going to fly in this town. So I finally just figured the better thing to do, the more practical thing to do, is instead of the mayor appointing all 9 school board members, let the mayor appoint only 4 and let the people elect 5. So take the city, make it 5 zones, and let the people elect 1 school board member in their zone who will sit on the school board. But at least you will now know in West Philly who's that person that came to you for your vote, who said the things you wanted to hear, and they have to come before you. So it's very difficult to know what the school's doing. First of all, they have certain meetings, and if you want to go, you have to go there, sit there, then you have, like, I don't know, 2 minutes to say something. Let us bring the school district to the people.
Yeah.
We complain about parents aren't engaged. Well, let's make it easier for them to be engaged. And I also look at things like, I'm really curious about, like the purchases of the school district. Like for me, I like to take a look at the school lunch program because I hear nothing good about it. And listen, when I was young, school lunch was all right. Like, in other words, it wasn't Shangri-La, but listen, the food was all right.
Yeah.
But now it just seems to be so troubling. And what I would say is, like, well, if we're getting our children's food from New York City, why is that?
Yeah.
What if we could take, like, the one zone, there's 5 zones, and here, there might have a different needs. For example, if you're in a section with a lot of Mexican kids, how about putting Mexican, like, why don't we get it from the vendors around the neighborhood? I'll bet it's fresher. I'll bet it's tastier.
It's made better,
You're
probably.
tied in with the community, like creating opportunities. But if you're over here, we got a lot of Muslim kids, and how about the halal, right?
Yeah.
How about the cuisine? How about the holidays? How about, the fact that we're understanding the culture? And I think it could be just so much better if we did that. The people would be engaged, and
More
there
buy-in.
has to be, in my opinion, we have to have a clear understanding about what the school does, right?
Exactly.
The school teaches, the school enriches, and it works with parents. It's like right now we have a very combative relationship with parents when it comes to education, and I think that's completely wrong. We are at your service. We are here to help your children, and we have to end this cycle, right? Because it's a cycle that continues, and we have to bring the children into appreciating school, and their children will appreciate school, and their children. But we have generations of people who have found that school has done nothing for them, and they don't really appreciate school. And, there are many reasons for that, but, there's the things that the kids want to do, the things they love to do, and then the things that will really help them.
Yeah.
But if we mix it all up, and then some kids need more education and other kids don't. Some kids have wonderful resources at home, and other kids have nothing. But at the same time, what I would say is, look at our libraries. Like, what do our libraries do exactly? And I would say you have to redo the libraries entirely, in my opinion. Like, in other words, here's what I think about libraries and what they should be.
Maybe more resources than what they have on the Parkway. I know the Parkway Library is, like, phenomenal. Like, very phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, they have a lot of things going on. They're also on the Parkway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm mainly concerned about neighborhood
Yeah.
libraries. And what is on my smartphone? Is there more on my smartphone than in the library? If I go to a library, if a child goes to the library, one, it has to be safe.
Yeah.
It has to be safe. It has to be safe inside and outside. And the hours have to be amenable to the people who use it. And then when you go there, there has to be the technology that you don't have at home, and the resources, in the library. And so what I really think is that, one of the biggest problems we have in poor neighborhoods is lack of credit. And it's been like, people wonder, how do we get past this credit problem? See, I think the library gets you past the credit problem. Like, if a child goes to the library and they have a library card, they take out, let's say, a limited number of books, and they return them on time in good condition. And that's using the public resources, right? That's the idea that I'm going to use this and you might use it next. I'm going to return it on time and in good condition. I'm going to treat all these things respectfully. So after a period of time, I get to borrow more books. Well, maybe at a certain point in time, I can borrow electric guitar or a violin or a piece of scientific equipment or crafts, right? At a certain point in time, maybe I can take out a gaming console that I could never afford, right? Maybe at a certain time I could get streaming on my laptop. Maybe I can do things. But if there's something I really, truly want, and I could take it home for like 3 days or 5 days, if you said to me, if you take this math test and get a 95, we'll let you take it out for 10 days. Would that encourage me to do that? If I could take this camera home and do video and come in and get tutoring and learn on, probably,
Maybe.
right?
That's
Maybe,
possibility,
right?
yeah.
So that is credit, right? Because I've returned things, I'm developing credit. And for adults, it's the same thing. Like, in other words, in a fanciful way, and I don't mean like in an unrealistic way, but like in a fanciful way in reality, what if you as an adult could go to the library and the Amazon truck would pull up,
Oh.
right? The credit. And it's really built on the fact that you have good credit. And we're now instilling like you could see, some other kid says, how'd you get that? Oh, I got this score on my library card, credit. Oh, I want that credit because I want to do that. And listen, you do have to treat this like credit.
Okay.
In other words, if you have a credit card, you don't get a pass if you're not paying your credit things on time, right? And that's where I find the problem. When you start giving people a pass because of sympathy, you're not helping them. You're not helping them. We're trying to pull people out of poverty. That is not an easy thing to do. We're providing opportunities. We're trying to tie libraries into schools, into education, into careers, because what drives people is aspiration. It's a hopefulness. I do the same thing, by the way, with returning citizens and incarcerated citizens. If you have someone who is doing like a 20-year sentence, they're not on the street anymore. They're not clubbing anymore. They're not whatever they were before. Maybe they were a good father, maybe they weren't. But now they're in the four walls. And what they might be motivated to do is to reconnect with their children and to use their bad experiences in a way that their children will not end up making the same mistakes or, unfortunately, shot or dead, right? But we have to help them. We have to help them reconnect to their, we help them, right? Like, here's your kid's homework. Here's the answers. Here's the process. So they're learning.
Yeah.
And then on Friday, they get on and they help their kids with the homework. They got all the answers, right? And it's a way of reconnecting. And I think that is so important because we will not end this cycle of violence if it just continues, right? 375 Philadelphians having been incarcerated. That's a lot of children without a mother or without a father. Mostly it's men, though.
Okay.
And then they become vulnerable. They become vulnerable because of poverty, because of challenges of being a single mother, because of the streets that they came from, because of the poor education and the lack of things for them to do and the unhealthy, the unclean area they are. We have to build that back. So in many ways, I see the school, the library. I see, the parks and the open spaces, the recreation centers, but it has to be around what the person wants to be, and they will have to experiment and find and eventually get some idea. But they can't get the idea if they are denied the opportunity. In other words, if young Mozart here has no piano.
Yeah.
There's a piano over here and nobody interested. Like every school needs a certain level of equity in resources, facility, and other things. And then finally, I'd say this, we spend a lot of time in government talking about the table. Like this is a $200 table, this is a $2,000 table, this is a $20,000 table. Most people are really more concerned about what's on the table. Is it dinner on the table? Is it computer on the table? Like what is on this table? Like if you have things on your table and I have nothing on mine, or if I have all this stuff on my $2,000 table and you got like zero on your $200 table, the first thing you want is not a $2,000 table. You want the things that are on my table to be on your table. And that's a much quicker thing that we could do. And I believe, that is a way to show people. Like people ask me, what's the most immediate thing you could do? Well, if you do those things, that's immediate. People see that you care.
Yes.
And it's much easier to deliver.
Thank you so much, David O. We're going to wrap it up here only because we're coming up on time. But just so you guys know, Election Day is going to be Tuesday, November 7th. And thank you so much for coming on out.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. And thank you to our TD in the back. We're good? All right.
All right.
Thank you so much.
The bell is ringing.
The bell is ringing. I'm like, that is